Good morning, everyone. Today we have Tisha B'Av. Today we are learning the seventh Perek of Sanhedrin. So there will not be shared tomorrow. We will continue on Erev Shabbos. Today's shiur is the additions Aaron Nachman and Simcha Cohen and Yishem Shem Aliyah. For Shlema for Yisrael Barach, Tasazol Derech Aliyana B'Tzir Abra, Av Yisrael Berisha, Chai Bas Dava Beit, for Shlema B'Soch Shtar Chol Yisrael. And for the shiur is the Schus Bracha Rachlev, Sefer Bracha V'Atzlacha, Ben Chana for Shidduch B'Karav, and Shmuel David Ben Hinder, Miriam for Atzlacha and Kohen Yanim. Here we go. Zion, Sanhedrin, Zion. Now, since yesterday we're talking about the death penalty and how it was carried out, today we're going to talk about the four ways that beheading would put someone to death, which is called Mises beheading. Mises necessarily based on the four methods of execution given to based skila, sreifa, perek, stoning, burning, beheading, and strangling. All that's going from the stoning being the most harsh and strangling being the lightest. Rabbi Shimon says that the order from harshest to lightest is as follows: Sreifa, Sila, Cherek. So he holds that burning, stoning, strangling, and beheading. He also does a different order. Zu mitzvahs haniskalin. So what we spoke about yesterday's Perek was the procedure for executing those that have been sentenced to stoning. And the other three methods we're going to be talking right now. So, Mishnah Beis, mitzvahs hanisrafim, the procedure for carrying out the sentence, those who've been sentenced to death by burning. Hayu mashkein mishakin oso bezevel ad akavosov. They sink the criminal into a pile of manure until his knees, so he cannot move his legs. The nosnin suda kosher letoch haraka, right? They put a rough scarf inside a soft scarf. The korech al savaru, and wind the scarves around his neck. Someone standing on one side pulls the scarves toward him, and someone standing on the other side pulls the scarves toward him. Until the condemned opens his mouth. Someone lights a fire under a bar of lead. That's the lead and pours it into his mouth. The Yeredes, the Soch, Meyav, the Chomeres, Espene Ma'av, Meyav. And it goes down into his stomach and burning his innards. The before I should bring down that none of it. Okay, so the lead is actually heated before the scarves are pulled, so it's ready to be poured down his throat as soon as the mouth is open, and you don't have a delay. The person bring down that Nadav and Avihu, they died when a fire from heaven entered their nostrils and burned them on the insides. So even though the outside of their bodies remains intact, the Torah describes their deaths as burning, which teaches that the execution of burning can be done from the inside without destroying the actual body. So since burning can be done that way, it should be done that way because of the mitzvah of the which means to love your fellow as yourself. So we learn from that passage that even the execution of a criminal must be carried out with as little pain as possible. Um, so therefore, you burn his insides instead, since that's the quicker and least less painful to burning his entire body. As we're going to see tomorrow during the Kinas, we know the stories of the the Asar Malchus, where they they wrapped one, the Romans wrapped one of them in a Sefer Torah and put the sponges on his heart and like burned him alive. You know, that's a you learn more that tomorrow during the Kinas, but that's a type of strafer that's cruel and and horrific punishment. And this is based in where they open the guy's mouth and they pour hot lead down his throat, and he dies very quickly without burning his outsides. It's a much more it's a quicker execution and therefore more compassionate, if you want to use that word. Anyways, okay, let's continue. Um, Rebuta says, "Af who im makes biyadam lo hayu b'kaimim bo mitzvah." But then, if he dies at their hands while they're squeezing his neck, when they choke him to death, they have not fulfilled the mitzvah of Mises Sreifa. The poskin as piv b'tzvas shalom. So instead, they force his mouth open with tongs. Someone lights a fire under a bar of lead, and once the lead has melted, it pours it into his mouth. And it goes down into his stomach, burning his innards. Okay. Amar Blazer Bartzadik says a little differently. It says, Ma'aser Vas Kohen Achash Shizunsa once happened that a certain Kohen's daughter committed adultery, which is punishable by burning. And they surrounded her with bundles of branches and burned her by setting the branches on fire. Amrullah, the Chama said to him, that happened because the court of that time was not knowledgeable in the laws of the Torah, but in fact the correct method is to pour lead, as we learned previously. Mishnah Gimel. Moving on. Mitzvah Sana Haragim. The procedure for those who have been sentenced to beheading. They would cut his head off with a sword while he stood, just as the government does when it executes someone. Rabbi Yehuda says, this kind of beheading is disgraceful because his headless body falls to the ground. Instead, when he is lying face down, we place his head on a block, the kufitz, and chop it off with an axe. Amrullah, the Chacham said to Yehuda, there is no death more disgraceful than that. The Chacham explained that the axe that breaks bones at the back of the neck, making the corpse even more repulsive than it has to be. A sword, on the other hand, cuts the front of the neck, killing the person by severing his windpipe and his food pipe. For that reason, when a sword is used, the condemned must be erect with the front of his neck exposed. He cannot be lying face down on a block. If Yehuda agrees that beheading with an axe is repulsive, nevertheless, he answers using a sword in place of an axe because the Canaan beheaded criminals with a sword, and the Torah says you shall not follow the laws of the Canaan. So even though this verse refers to practices that lead to worshiping idols, the Chacham answered certain other Canaanite customs to avoid copying the Canaan. Rabbi Yehuda prohibits beheading with a sword and requires an axe to be used instead. So although he said that kind of beheading with a sword is disgraceful, that was not his main reason to answer the sword. Rather, he meant that beheading with a sword is also disgraceful, and so nothing is gained by using a sword. We should therefore use an axe instead to avoid copying the Canaan. That's according to the Meiri. The Chachamim, however, learned from Sukkim in the Torah that beheading should be done with a sword. Therefore, the Isser of copying the Quran does not apply because we use a sword not to copy the Quran and to follow the instructions of the Torah. Um, okay, and the last one, the last of the four is basic mitzvahs. The procedure for those who have been sentenced to strangling, hayu mushkayin also bezevel ad akrivos. So similar to the sreifa, they sink the criminal into a pile of menorah until his knees so he cannot move his legs. The noise in Suda Kasha, the Socharaka, and they put a rough scarf inside a soft scarf, the Korech al Savaru, and wind the scars around his neck. Zemosh Eslo, Zemosh Eslo, and someone standing on one side pulls the scars toward him, and someone standing on the opposite side pulls the scars toward him. Adshi Nashi Yotza, until they have strangled him and his soul leaves his body. Okay, moving on to the next topic. These are the ones who are sentenced to stoning. There are 18 Averus that are sentenced to stoning. Someone who cohabits with his mother or with his father or with his father's wife who's not his mother, meaning his stepmother or whatever, or with his daughter-in-law, or with another man, or with an animal. Um, in all these cases, also the woman is sentenced to stoning as well. Ma'isha hamavia es behema, and a woman who brings herself onto an animal, brings the animal onto herself. V'hamegadiv, one who curses Hashem. V'avodi v'razar, one who worships an idol. V'nosin mizar l'malch, one who gives one of his children to Malach. Which we'll talk about shortly. In a couple of Mishnayos, we're going to get to what Malach is. The Baal of Yadoni, one who practices of Yadoni, which is communicating with the dead. Chalas Shabbos, one who violates Shabbos. Kalal Aviv Imo, one who curses his father and mother. V'aba al Nara Hamarasa, and one who cohabits with a betrothed Nara. She's in between the Eris and Kedushin, so Chayiv Skila. Mace is one who persuades another person to worship an idol. Mediach, one who corrupts the residents of a town by persuading them to worship an idol. Chashif, one who performs magic. And the wayward and rebellious son, which we're going to learn about on Friday. Okay, so let's go through this list. Let's go through this list. Okay, so Abba al someone cohabits with his mother, who was once married to his father, was now unmarried by mistake. He cohabits with her by mistake. Chayav aleh mishum ein mishum eshes av. He must bring one chadas offering for the sin of cohabiting with his mother, and one chadas offering for the sin of cohabiting with his father's wife. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Eno chayiv el mishum ha'ein b'vad." Rabbi Yehuda says he must bring a chatas offering only for the sin of cohabiting with his mother, because since they're divorced, she's no longer his father's wife, and therefore she's not chayiv for that korban. Next one. Habal Ashes Av. If someone cohabits with the wife of his father, who's still married to his father, not his mother, by mistake. Chayiv Aleh Mishum Ashes Av Mishum Ashes Ish. He must bring one chatas for the avera of cohabiting with his father's wife, and a second chatas for the avera of cohabiting with a married woman. Cohabiting with one's father's wife is forbidden both during his father's lifetime and after his father's death. Ben and the Eris and Ben Hanisun. both during the Erisin and during the Nifun. Next one. Haba Kalaso, someone cohabits with his daughter-in-law, who's still married to his son, does that by mistake. He must bring one chatas for the avera of cohabiting with his daughter-in-law, and a second chatas for cohabiting with a married woman. Cohabiting with one's daughter-in-law is also both during his son's lifetime and after his death. Both during their Erisin and during the Nisim, both before and after the engagement and before and even after the marriage. Next, the next three sets. So we already did three of them. Now we do another three. So a man who has bia with another man or with an animal, isha via as a behema, and a woman who brings an animal on herself. So, in those three cases, if the person sinned, in what way did the animal sin? Rather, because Reuben came to a person through this animal, so the Torah therefore states that it should be stoned, so that others are not sin with it as well. Other explanation. It must be executed so that it does not happen that the animal walks in the street and people say, this is the animal that caused so and so to be stoned, which will bring shame to the sinner. So therefore, you kill the animal. Mishnah Yud Hamagadef Ena, someone who blesses Hashem, someone who curses Hashem's name, Ena Chayiv Achi Faris as Hashem. He's not liable to execution unless he says the actual name of Hashem. He really heard someone else say the name of Hashem, then he made the curse. He's not executed because he did not say the name himself. And we're talking about like saying like the YKWFK spelled out or saying any of the other names that we don't normally pronounce. Just saying the word Hashem. It's probably not a good idea, but it's probably not going to get you the death penalty. So don't try it at home. Amar Yeshua ben Karcha. Yeshua ben Karcha said, "B'chol yom danin es ha'edim b'chinoi." Every day of the trial, the judges deal with the witnesses using a substitute for Hashem's name. Yake Yossi es Yossi. They would ask him, did he say Yossi should strike Yossi, using Yossi in place of Hashem's name? Because the word Yossi, Yud Vav Samachir, has four letters, and just like the four-letter name of Yekevavke, and because its numerical value is also 86, which is the gematria of Elohim, which is also one of Hashem's names. So that way, during this trial, you're asking, did he say that Yossi should strike Yossi using that as a euphemism for Hashem's name? However, once the discussion is over and the court is ready to rule that he is guilty, lo hargim bekinoi. They cannot kill him based on a substitute for Hashem's name because they must hear the witness repeat exactly what he said. Rather, they send everyone out of the room so the witnesses do not utter the curse in front of more people than necessary. They show them as a gadol shebehen, and they question the senior witness, Omin Lo, and more Masha Shamata Beferish, and say to him, say explicitly what you heard him say, but who Omer, and he says it, he repeats it word for word. Had the Yanim, Omdin Araglehan, and the judges, upon hearing the curse, they get to their feet, the Korin, and they tear their clothes, and they may not sew them back again. Sheni Omer Afani Kamohu, and the second witness then says, I too heard the same thing as he did. Shlishi Omer Afani Kamohu, and the third witness, if there is one, says, I too heard the same thing as he did. If there are more witnesses, they say so as well. Okay, Mishnah Vav. Someone who worships an idol, the punishment of stoning applies whether he worships the idol in the way it is usually worshipped, Whether he slaughters an offering, burns an offering, pours wine, or bows down to it, that's not the way it's usually worshipped. And whether he accepts it upon himself as a god, Omer lo Eli Eliata, or whether he says to the idol, "You are my god." However, someone hugs an idol, Avanashi kisses it, sweeps the floor in front of it, Marbets, sprinkles water on the dirt around it, so the dust will not blow on it. Marchetz, the one who washes it, rubs it with oil, Malbish, and he dresses it, Manil, or puts shoes on the ayol, over below sasi, he transgresses a a losas, a negative commandment, but is not put to death unless that's the way that it's usually worshipped. I know there bishmo. Someone makes a vow in the name of an idol, for instance, that the offroot is us to me in the name of such and such an idol. The Mekayim bishmo, or the Mekayim bishmo, or swears in its name that I swear by such and such an idol that certain event to happen. Over below sase, he's over at Enes Sase, but is not put to death. Hapoer asma the Baal Peor, Zuhi Avodah. Someone who defecates in front of the idol Baal Peor is executed because that is the usual form of worship. Zorek Evan Markulis, Zuhi Avodah. And someone who throws a stone at the idol Markulis is executed because that is its usual worship. Okay, continuing on. Okay, so we mentioned in Mishnah Dalet, we mentioned about Molech. So we're going to talk about Molech right now. So this was a minig of the Canaanim the um, that they performed for the sake of a statue that was called Molech. So its followers did not regard Molech as a god; rather, they were serving Molech is not idol worship. But so how to work after the priests lit a fire in front of a statue, a father would hold would hand his child over to the priest, and they would return the child to the father. The fire and the father would then pass the child over the fire from one side to the other without burning him. And we're going to talk about this very right now. So this is Mishnah Zayin. I noticed in Mizar the Malach, someone who gives one of his children to Molech, Eno Chayiv Ad Shiyim, so the Molech Yaver Beish. He is not liable to execution unless he hands the child over to the priest of Molech and then passes the child through the space over the fire. Master the Molech Lo Haver Beish. If he handed the child over to the priest of Molech, did not pass him through the space over the fire, or if he passed the child through the space over the fire, then I hand him over to the priests of Malach, and a chayev, he is not chayev. Unless he hands him over to the priest of Malach, he passes him through the space over the fire. Continuing on, Baal Ov, someone who practices Ov, Zeh Pison. This is a fortune teller who takes a skull, burns incense for it, and asks questions about the future, which it answers. Hamadaber, Shechio, or this is someone who raises the spirit of a dead person, which then speaks from his armpit. The Yadoni, a person who practices Yadoni, Zeh Hamadaber Pipiv. This is someone who puts a bone from an animal called Yadua in his mouth, and the bone speaks from his mouth. Hare Ela Beskila, these people are punished by stoning. V'hanisha behem be'ashara is someone who asks them a question about the future, which he wants them to answer by using the methods of Ov or Yadoni, transgress and a Isser, but is not put to death. Okay, now we're going to talk about people who are stoned to death. Sorry, no. we're continuing talking about the people who were stoned, and the next avera is the following, which is Mishnah Ches. Hamechalal Esser Shabbos, someone who violates Shabbos, with Dvar Shechayev and Al Zedam Karis. He is chayav to be executed only if he does something for which, had he done it on purpose, but without witnesses or without warning, he would have been liable to karis. And for which, had he done it by mistake, he would have been chayav a koran chatas. It means that a person is executed for violating Shabbos only if he performs one of the 39 malachos. These are different from the other violations of Shabbos in that they are punishable by karis if done on purpose, without witnesses or without a warning, or the shiur to bring a chatas if it was done by mistake. So the person do any of these malachos on purpose in front of witnesses after having been warned, he is sentenced to execution. However, if he violates Shabbos in some other way, even on a derisa level, he is not chayiv to Lisa. So the next one, someone who curses his father and mother, Eino chayiv actually call them b'shem. There's not chayiv to execution unless he curses them using the name of God. Kul and Makino, if he cursed them using a substitute for the name of Hashem, such as like Rahman. Rabbi Meir rules that he is also chayiv to execution. Chachamim pochim, but the Chachamim rule that he is not chayiv. He's pater. Mishnah Tes Haba al nara hamarasa. Someone who could have it with a betrothed nara, eno chayiv ashtehei nara. He is not chayiv to be stoned unless he is still a nara, besula, and a virgin. Marasa, a betrothed wife who's not fully married. It has to be in those three things: nara, besula, marasa. The Hebrew Beis and she is still living in her father's house. Bo alash time. If two men cohabit with her, with the betrothed nara living in her father's home, harishim beskila, then the first one is put to death by stoning. She was still a virgin at the time. Sheni Mechenek, and the second one was put to death by strangling because she was no longer a virgin when he cohabited with her. Mishnah Yud, Hamesi, someone who persuades others to worship an idol. Zehedjot, Hamesi says Hahedjot. This refers to a regular person, not a Navi, who persuades one regular person, not a town of people. In this case, the punishment is stoning, but if a Navi persuades a regular person or a regular person persuades a town, his punishment is strangling rather than stoning. Amalo, he says to him, Yesh Yira b'makom. There is a God in a certain place. Kach ocheles, kach shose, kach metiva, kach maria. That this is what it eats. This is what it drinks. This is how it rewards those who worship it, and this is how it punishes those who do not worship it. Kol chayve misus v'torah ein machminim aleim. In all the cases in the Torah of people who are liable to execution, we do not hide witnesses to catch them in the act, chutz mizu, except for this one, to catch someone persuading another to worship idols. We do hide the witnesses. Amar l'shnayim v'hein Edav. If he says to two people that they should worship an idol and they are fit to be his witnesses, there's no need to hide witnesses because these two will testify against him. And also the base of something. Also, they only have to bring him to court where the judges can try his case and stone him based on their edus. Amar the echad. If he said to one person, since that person cannot testify against him alone, we trick him into saying it in front of two witnesses. And he says, Who? That person says to him, I have friends who like to do this. If the persuader then goes and tells the person's friends about the idol, he has sinned before two witnesses, and they can testify against him. However, if he was clever, and says he cannot speak about it in front of them because he is afraid that they'll testify against him in court. acharei hagadol. We hide witnesses behind the fence in a certain place. The person to whom he was speaking then brings the persuader to that place. Who Omer lo Amor Mash Emarta Li Biyich, and say to him that and say to him there, tell me privately what you said to me before. So the guy doesn't know there, aid him behind the fence. He's talking to him privately as one person to the guy thinking that he's not going to get caught. But how the Omer lo and the persuader tells him what he said before. Who Omer li heyach taniach es elokenish b'shemayim v'neilach v'navad etzem avanim. He should respond to it. How can we leave our God in heaven and go worship wood and stone? Im chazer bo harez muta. If he takes back his words and agrees that they should not worship the idol, that's fine. He's not executed. But if he said it's our chiyuv to worship the idol, or it's good for us to worship the idol, so the witness is standing behind the fence, being the court, where the judges can try his case and stone him based on their edus. Someone says, I will worship the idol, and you shall do so after me. Or I will go worship the idol, and you should do so after me. Or let us go together and worship the idol. As a beach, elef, as a beach, nelef, in his abech. In his beach. Or I will slaughter an offering for the idol's sake, and you shall do so after me. Or I will go and slaughter an offering, and you shall do so after me. Or let us go and slaughter an offering. Aktir, elech, aktir, nelech, and aktir. Or I will burn an offering or incense for the idol's sake, and you should do so after me. Or I will go and burn an offering or incense, and you shall do so after me. Or let us go and burn an offering or incense. Anasich, elech, anasich, nelech, I will pour wine for the idol's sake, and you shall do so after me, or I will go and pour wine, and you should do so after me, or let us go and pour wine. Or I will bow to the idol, and you should do so after me, or I will go bow, you should do so after me, or let us go and bow. All these are expressions of persuasion which the speaker can be put to death. Hamadiach, continuing with the list from Mishnah Dalid, someone who corrupts the people of a town by persuading them to worship idols. This is someone who says, let us go worship a certain idol. Although a person persuades an individual is chayiv, even for suggesting that they would act separately, worship the idol, and you shall do so after me, as we learned previously. A person who corrupts a town's resident is not chayiv unless he says that they should act together and worship the idol. And lastly, for today, Mishnah Yud Aleph, someone who performs magic, the one who makes something happen through magic is chayiv to execution, and not one who makes it merely appear as though something had happened. Rabbi Kiva says the following example in the name of Rabbi Yeshua. Shnayin lo tink Yeshua. Two people use magic to gather cucumbers to one spot in the field. Echad lo kipatu, echad lo kichayim. It is possible that one of them gathers and is not liable to execution. The other one gathers and is chayav for execution. How so? The one who makes it actually happen, that the cucumbers are gathered, is chayiv. Whereas the one who makes it merely appear to have happened, the cucumbers have not moved, is not chayiv. Thank you for joining us. There will not be shiur tomorrow because it's Tish B'Av. We will continue on Friday with Perek Ches, hopefully at the regular time. And I wish everyone an easy fast, and maybe Zochet to see the Gula Shlema with the shiur coming. If we do it the fast, it should be an easy one. And so it's a hard day tomorrow. Make the most of it, and we'll see you back here on Friday morning. Have a wonderful day. An easy fast.